Derinkiyu is the largest and the best explored of the underground cities in the central area of Turkey, known as Cappadocia.
A worker knocked through a wall in a Turkish town and found a corridor that hadn't seen light in 3,000 years. The archaeologists who cleared the opening didn't find a cellar or a tunnel. They found an entire underground city with ventilation shafts still pulling air, stone doors that still rolled, and rooms so preserved the tool marks looked fresh. More than 120 meters have been mapped, but ground sensors show the network stretches far beyond what's been opened. So who built this hidden world? Why did they seal it? And what's still waiting behind the doors no one has opened yet? The breakthrough that changed the map. The first opening happened during a simple renovation when a homeowner asked for a cracked corner to be repaired, and the crew found plaster that sounded hollow when tapped. And the archaeologists who came to check the wall saw mortar older than the house itself. So they cleared it with small tools and soft brushes and watched the seam breathe a thin draft of dry air. And when the stone came free, the light reached into a level corridor that held a clean curve overhead, with tool marks that ran in straight lines, which told them water had not shaped this space and chance had not opened it. People had. They moved in with lamps and measured the width and the height and the level of the floor, and the numbers repeated across the first stretch, which means a plan had been drawn and followed without error. And at the first bend, they met a round stone door set in a track with a notch inside the wall so it could be locked from within by the people who wanted to hold the passage. And the cut was so clean, the door still moved with a slow push, even after centuries, which is the sign of a rule that every threshold must work even when no one is watching. As the survey grew, the tablet filled with rooms that mirrored each other on both sides of a main run, and shafts that rose towards small openings at the surface where air still drifted, and benches carved along the walls showed where people could sit to rest or meet, and shallow shelves held the right height for jars, and narrow turns after each door kept the line of sight short and safe, which revealed a hand that understood movement and stress and heat and fear and built for them all. The team compared the plan to other places they knew, and the pattern fit the old underground cities of Cappadocia and the long rooms found under other Anatolian towns, yet the freshness here was startling because much of this network had been sealed before it could be reused or stripped. So soot was thin, and dust lay in even layers that came only from time, and floor channels still ran true to sumps that would drain after a spill, and the walls did not flake or crumble, which is what happens when air and water do not break a space for hundreds of years. Across the country, another team at Gordian opened a royal tomb where a wooden chamber had survived under a mound with beams that still held their weight and bronze vessels that still hung on iron nails where mourners had placed them. And that sealed room showed how total preservation can be when builders understand dryness and cover and the right way to close a door. And it raised a quiet thought that ran through every tent and every lab, because if a royal chamber above ground can hold its shape for 28 centuries, then a city below ground, with stable air, can guard whole rooms of daily life and small pieces of writing that never made it into later books. But if families really lived here for weeks or months at a time, how did they breathe? How did they cook? And how did they keep the air clean enough to survive? How to keep life running under stone? The first lesson came from the way the air moved, because the passages breathe through paired shafts that rise to the surface at different heights and face different winds, and a small change in temperature pushes warm air upward while cooler air falls through the second shaft, and this steady cycle feeds fire and lungs without fans or pumps. And that quiet exchange explains how families could cook and pray and sleep without headaches or soot blackening the ceilings. Water tells the second part of the story, since shallow channels run along the base of many walls and meet at low points before they join a deeper sump, and the floor slopes by a measure you can feel under your feet but barely see with your eyes. And that gentle fall moves spills and wash water without cutting ruts, which is how a place stays clean when it must hold people and animals and grain for a season that might last longer than anyone wants to admit when the first door closes. The third part is the way the doors work, because round stones sit in careful grooves with a keyed pocket hidden behind the jamb so a bar can seat and hold the circle against a push, and every door sits just before a turn, so nothing dangerous can fly straight down a hall if a door is forced, and the thickness of the walls at those points rises above the usual cut, which shows that the builders had fought and learned and revised their plan until it matched the world they knew. Rooms repeat a pattern that reveals daily life rather than panic, because there are small chapels with low altars and niches for lamps and benches along three sides where people can sit and listen, and there are storage rooms with ledges at even heights so jars can be stacked, and there are animal stalls with tether points and drains, and all of these appear at the same intervals in every branch, which means the design was made once and taught to teams who cut in different zones at the same time. Tool marks speak about training and order, since you can follow the bite of broad chisels where the walls needed to be dressed and see the rhythm of point tools where a hard band crossed the work, and the direction of the strokes stays constant from room to room, which is not what you see in a space made by untrained hands. And this tells us a workshop tradition existed that kept techniques stable across generations, and that kind of tradition does not form around a single season of fear. It grows in a community that has decided to hold this option ready. A city this planned, this precise, should have left some kind of record. So where are the names? Where are the signs? And what did the team find carved into the stone? Words that survived, where voices could not. In a tight side room near a choke point, the team found shallow incisions that did not match the bite of a cutting tool and were too regular to be scratches, and under angled light, the lines came up with a steady width that fits a stylus, and the spacing repeated like a set of signs rather than random marks, which is the first sign that some kind of writing still sits on these walls, even if time has made it faint. Scholars took high-resolution images from multiple angles and built a composite so they could see soft lines that the eye could not hold under a moving lamp, and they began to match shapes to known signs from Anatolian scripts, and some forms matched well, and others felt local, which happens when a workshop takes a formal system and makes it fit the hands that use it. And early tests suggest a short dedication that names a group and marks the completion of a section, and that is exactly the kind of text that fits a community effort rather than a royal decree. In other rooms, tiny traces of pigment sit in the base of incised lines where a brush once laid colour to make the signs readable by lamplight, and the mixture points to iron-based red with a carbon black used to deepen strokes, which is a recipe known from the region above ground, and that link matters because it means the underground city is not a separate world with its own culture. It is the same culture solving a different set of problems with the same tools and the same pride. Beyond the city below, the royal tomb at Gordian adds context because the bronze vessels hung on iron nails show clear wear from heat and liquid, which means they were used in life before they were placed in death, and incense burners carry thin, hard soot that builds when a tool is used again and again, and that habit of placing used tools with the dead shows that people chose to send the things that defined their daily roles, rather than objects made only for burial. And that same habit likely existed in the rooms below, which means a sealed chamber could still hold simple boards or leather with ink if the air stayed dry. If even a single piece of wood with writing lies under dust in a closed room, the value for history would be beyond measure, since such a page could list the names of families tied to specific rooms, the trades they practiced, the season the section opened, and the threat that pushed them to plan for life underground. And those lines would turn stone and silence into a record of real people who built a second city to protect the first. And that turn is what every researcher hopes to make before a careless move harms what time preserved. But the stone itself keeps a record. So what did the dust and the ash and the scorch marks tell the team about what pushed people underground in the first place? The land that pushed people underground. The ground, under Anatolia, holds old faults that have moved for ages and still move now. And when a series of strong shocks strikes a town, the safest place might be thick stone hewn into a hill where roofs cannot fall and streets cannot split. And the pattern of reinforcement around key doors and the careful turns that break long lines show that the builders understood how to ride out strain and how to slow anything that tried to rush the halls. And that knowledge does not grow in a year. It comes from living with the land long enough to respect its force. Layers on chamber floors read like a thin book, with light dust that speaks of quiet time and sudden bands of fine ash that show a season when fire fell from above. And in some caves across the region, thin glassy grains sit in a way that points to heat far beyond the hearth. And that kind of deposit can follow distant eruptions or rare impacts. And while no single layer settles an argument, a line of such signs across sites begins to explain why people chose to prepare rooms that could keep life steady when the surface could not. Stories told in the region echo those pressures, since old texts speak of gates to the lower world and journeys below past doors that roll shut, and they speak of fire that falls from the sky and punishes a proud city. And while later readers may take these as symbols, the first people to tell them may have seen a bright streak or a fall of ash or a series of shocks, and then chosen to pass the memory along in words that a child could hold. And a child who grows up with such a story learns to value a cool room that breathes during the hottest month. Religion leaves its trace in the plan because chapels appear at intervals with benches and altars set so a group can gather without smoke building above them, and percussion marks on the floors near those spaces suggest steady foot traffic rather than a rush, and lamp soot near the ceiling is thin and even, which is what you see when a rite repeats and people know where to stand and how long to stay. And no one invests this kind of work in a shelter meant for a single night. They invest it in a place that is part of life. Taken together, the faults and the ash and the old stories and the quiet chapels paint a picture of a people who faced seasons when the surface was loud and unkind and chose to move a part of life below, where temperature holds steady and water and air can be managed with simple tools and patience. And the result is a city that never asked for glory and never sought the sun. It asked only to serve when needed and to wait in silence when not. And it did that so well that it is still waiting for us now. If this much was hidden under a single street, then how far does the rest of it reach? And how much of the network is still sealed and unmapped? The size of the hidden world. The network under Midyat now includes more than 120 meters of cleared main corridors, with 50 rooms opened and logged, and the plan shows symmetry and repeating units that point to far more space beyond the current edge, since ground sensing returns cool signatures where stone gives way to voids that stretch under streets and courtyards and likely join branches that sit under other homes, and the team believes they have touched only a small part of what the full system holds. Elsewhere in Anatolia, there are underground cities that could shelter tens of thousands of people with stables and storage and meeting halls and chapels, and the shafts that pierce the surface still draw air in winter and summer at a pace that keeps smoke from building and breath from stalling, and the constant temperature keeps grain and tools and textiles safe over long periods, which is why families could live below for months when raids or poor harvests or broken roads made the surface an unsafe gamble for children and elders. The royal tomb at Gordian, with its preserved wood and hanging bronze, shows that builders understood how to keep a space stable when sealed, and that understanding applies even more to a dry carved city with thicker walls and fewer paths for air and water. So the hope that unopened rooms still hold organic items is not wishful. It is based on how these places were built and how long they have already held without damage, which is why every sealed door is treated like a page that must be read without tearing. Along the western coast, Roman era, rock-cut tombs closed with stone plates that still slide and turn with a confidence that comes only from careful carpentry in stone. And when the first dust falls away, the paint and carving look fresh because dry air and darkness kept them safe. And this habit of sealing what matters is the thread that ties royal chambers to simple rooms under houses, since both depend on the same marriage of skill and restraint to make time a partner rather than an enemy. Remote sensing and satellite thermal imaging show dozens of clusters across Turkey that match the outlines of known underground cities and hint at others that have never been entered in modern times. And when you add up the potential volume across these signals, the number rivals the visible footprint of some surface districts, which suggests that underground life was not an oddity, but a common choice in certain eras, And the scale of that choice is only now coming into view as maps fill with measured space rather than rumors and stories. With so much still hidden and so much already exposed, the question now is not just what they will find next, but how they will keep it safe once the doors are open and the world is watching. The plan that protects the past and shares it. Well, the work begins with shared formats, so every team records coordinates and timestamps and room types in the same way. And a simple weekly table shows what was mapped and what stayed closed. And this rhythm builds trust because it lets the world follow progress without pushing crews to hurry. And steady reporting calms the urge to cut a door just to make a headline, which is the first rule in a place where a single mistake can erase things that time guarded for us without complaint. Air control stands second on the list because sealed rooms hold microclimates that must be measured before any human breath enters, and teams use probes to read humidity and temperature and gas levels through the smallest holes they can make. And if the numbers say the room can take a slow exchange of air, only then do they open it by degrees. And only then do they step inside with lights that give off little heat, and only after full recording is done do they touch an object, because order keeps meaning intact. Local communities sit at the center because the rooms lie beneath their homes and fields, and the best way to keep the work safe is to make it valuable to the people who own the doors. So crews train residents to help with recording and conservation and safe guiding, and small labs and stores in town keep funds on site. And the story is told in museums and schools near the entrances, so pride can grow with knowledge. And when pride and knowledge meet, doors stay watched and safe. Open data where it does no harm comes next, since high-resolution images of walls and rooms can be shared without risk to fragile items, and simple maps can go online with delays where needed, so looters cannot read the plan faster than law can act. And this balance lets scholars test readings and suggest links, while the objects themselves remain under the care of trained hands. And this wide look is how patterns across sites will be seen in time, and how a single town can find its place in a larger web. The last step is patience, because the preserved rooms we have already seen promise more to come, and the plan that protects a chamber is the plan that will deliver the best answers, so the crew must treat each door like the Gordian builders did when they closed the royal room and left it for people who would not be born for 100 generations. And that means we answer to those builders as much as to our own excitement, and we do the work the way they would hope we would, with care and with gratitude. The story of this Turkish town is simple and strong, because people who needed safety carved rooms that could hold life until the season of danger passed, and they made them so well that we can still walk their halls and breathe their air and see their tool marks and read their signs. And the sealed kingship chamber at Gordian shows what happens when a culture masters the art of closing a door and leaving it alone. And the rooms under Midyat show what happens when a culture learns to live below ground without losing grace or order. The scale across Anatolia tells us this was not a rare act, but a steady answer to pressure from land and sky and human conflict, and the plan that will carry this work forward is already in place, with shared records, careful air control, local hands in the lead, and patient opening of rooms that time has kept for us. If you want to be there when the next sealed door opens and the first light touches a shelf that last saw a lamp before Rome was founded, subscribe and tell us which chamber from any age you would choose to open if you could stand at the threshold and turn the light on for the first time.